First of all, in 2008 we had just come out of a major restructure for the banking sector as a whole. And this restructure really saved us through that very, very difficult period and continues to do that, because today the banking sector is probably the strongest sector in Egypt today, and that's not just by local recognition. I mean, even by international standards, the banking sector today continues to be resilient and very strong. We have high liquidity. The market average is 47.4 loan-to-deposit ratio. We have strong balance sheets. The banks are well capitalized. NPLs are relatively low, and whatever does appear has been provisioned for. So the banks have been very strong. In fact, when you talk about stress tests that have been imposed on many foreign banks in America and in Europe, these were all theoretical stress tests. We've gone through the most stringent test, 2008, the international crisis, as you just mentioned, a revolution, and a major currency crisis today. And until now, alhamdulillah, the banks are still maintain a very high level of confidence, and the banking sector, financial sector, is business as usual. So I think that in itself is a very, very strong signal. Furthermore, in the West or in Europe and the States, it was the states that had to, or the state that had to bail out the banks. In Egypt, it is the banks that have bailed out the state. So that in itself shows the contribution of Egyptian banks to the Egyptian economy. The question that's often posed is that the bank borrowing from the state borrowing from the bank is edging out or is pushing out private lending. And here I must say that this is not really true, because there is very little demand for loans. All the big ticket items that we used to see in the past years, in fertilizer, in cement, in petrochemicals, virtually don't exist anymore. And many people, many investors are standing on the sidelines waiting for the situation to improve. So there is no demand. I mean, you can say that the banks are neglecting private demand at the expense of the government. Furthermore, if you look at the amounts that the banks have loaned to the government, over 50%, or just about 50% of the amounts that have been loaned to the government are very short term, 1 year or less. So that when or if the demand does develop, this money can be very, very quickly shifted to, seeing as the loan-to-deposit ratio is 47.7%, this can be immediately switched to the private sector when it's needed. I'll just add one more point, not to take too long. Definitely the areas that the banks can continue to work on, and that is SMEs. And SMEs, most banks today in Egypt have set up specialized programs or specialized departments for SMEs. And the central bank and the ISCOR, which is the credit bureau, is actually setting up a database and information specifically for SMEs, which will make a very, very big difference, both in terms of diminishing risks and in terms of enabling the banks to be more aggressive or more active in SME lending. So I think that this is really the future of where the bank should be looking at. Of course, the big ticket items are very important, but I think these will come back with more stability or more confidence. But I think the SME area is one of the areas where the banks I've already started contributing, but I think this is the area that in the next few months should be the focus and should be the area where that will drive the economy forward. Again, I think that the important thing today is to have banks are not magicians. I mean, you have to have vision, confidence, and rule of law to be able to go forward or to be able to expand. But we are ready, the banks are strong, the liquidity is there, we really have all the assets to drive the economy forward. And we are already doing more than our share. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. I'll just add add on to that question, one more, just
before you ask the question, I wish to apologize to the audience. يعني بتأسف للحضور إني الميعاد اتأخر شوية. We're a bit late starting. If you will allow me, maybe I'll answer one question. But if you'll allow me, I will leave because I have a very important appointment at 1:30 in Antamea that I have to go to. So please excuse me if I leave very discreetly. Thank you.
Mohammed B, it's a pleasure having you once again. We apologize for being late. Just to add on to something that you were saying regarding the short-term lending to the government loans. What's the ratio from public loans and private loans in terms of lending to the government in this period of time on the short-term loans?
You mean public banks and private banks?
Yes.
I don't have the statistic. I'm talking about the banking sector as a whole. The banking sector as a whole, if we look at the financing of the T-bills and bonds, approximately just under 50%, it's about 49% is in 1 year or less, and about 51% is in more than 1 year. So the ability to switch or to use these funds once the demand starts picking up is virtually immediate.
Thank you very much, and I thank you for your time again. And then I'm going to move on to you, because I know you have to run as well, and then I'm going to move on to Sam, because he has to run as well, so it's going to be a pretty interesting panel. We talked about banks, and again, a lot of people are talking about small and medium enterprises. It's being important. Now, you know, and I know we've sat in a lot of conferences, the revolution, maybe 2008, 2010, 9 and 10, and we talked about small and medium enterprises, and we looked at the amount of funds that are earmarked in the banks, and especially the social fund of development. You're very unique in that case. And, you know, everybody, Big Musa this morning mentioned the social fund of development. Leadership of the country, you know, talk about the social fund of development. You're doing a fantastic job. Not everybody knows about it. If I can just get a touch on the role of the social fund of development in economic development.
Thank you very much, Ashraf, and unfortunately I also have to run for another meeting. Well, actually, I'll catch up on where Mr. Mohammed Ozal mentioned that the future now is the SMEs business, and in times of crisis, SMEs become a savior to the economy. However, a majority of such enterprises remain in the formal sector. I don't know what His Excellency Mr. Amr Musa mentioned about the social fund, but let me reiterate positive. Well, we welcome negative criticism, because this is how we can develop further and try to remedy. In times of crisis, and we are all witnessing now that we're all waiting for the IMF to give Egypt the $4.5 billion. On the other hand, which of course it has some hindrances and obstacles. However, on the other hand, we are able as an autonomous organization to mobilize resources from international donors. This is the good news. I mean, this is a negative note that gives a positive note that gives some positive vibes to the audience, that Egypt is receiving bilateral agreements and plenty of funds in that. A $200 million loan from the World Bank for labor-intensive projects is no joke. It provides for, however, it's temporary job opportunities, but it provides a large number of jobs at times of crisis. In terms of small enterprises, we receive funds from the European Investment Bank. Actually, and we pride ourselves in that right after the revolution took place, we started addressing donors, whether existing or potential donors, to try to give a hand to Egypt in times of crisis. And the response, I tell you, was extremely positive. I'm not going to mention one of them, which is the Islamic Bank for Development. This really started right after the revolution and before President Morsi was inaugurated as President of Egypt. So people are blaming me that I started to mobilize Islamic funds. But I tell you, there's a huge demand in this market for Islamic funds. So it's a matter of supply and demand, and it's very important to mobilize resources and allocate them to the right channels. Small and medium enterprises are still lack awareness in the market. All university graduates, all youngsters are afraid to mitigate the risk. So there's still plenty of room for more awareness and more encouragement by demonstrating success stories to the audience, to encourage them to become small business entrepreneurs and small business owners. In so many countries, SMEs are an important tool and a vehicle for development. How can we transform the informal sector to formal sector? This would be done through incentives, like, for instance, we're the only organization that does startups. So if you're a startup and you apply for a loan, you are tax exempt for 5 years, and this is by law. It's the law number 141 for the year 2004. We also give a hand to those beneficiaries or applicants to get their licenses through the social fund. Instead of going in circles, it's through our one-stop shop, whereby you can get a license in one place. Instead of going to the commercial registration, the taxation, the bank, the insurance for the collaterals, and so on and so forth. So there must be sort of good vehicles and good assistance to provide non-financial services also, such as training, vocational training, marketing, and so on. It's not just access to finance, it's access also to non-financial services, which is very important. And as I said, we pride ourselves in receiving excellent donors funds, but of course Egypt is all looking forward to the IMF loan, because this is a stamp from the international donors that Egypt qualifies for that. Let me give you also a brief on the outlook as I see it, not just on the SMEs, but SMEs is in fact very important too. However, donors coordination also is very important. If you harmonize with the EU, with the World Bank, with the Agence Française, they all complement each other. On the outlook, with the CBE reserves dropping, this just covers, what we have now just covers 3 months of imports. We witnessed a severe drop in foreign exchange reserves, and being an ex-banker, I can tell what the impact of this will be. With the pound collapse, the cost of necessities will certainly soar, and the crisis will definitely deepen. So we are really worried about our imports of wheat to start with, as the revolution slogan is "Aish Hurriya Adala Ijtimaiya," so how can we provide for the bread? Also, the FX reduction of imports by 40% due to the foreign exchange we're witnessing. Egypt imports 50% of its food supply, so you can all imagine what we're going to face. I don't want to sound negative, but I'm being pragmatic, I'm being, factual, so realistic. Thank you. On foreign direct investments, who would like to come and invest in Egypt with lack of security? I mean, let's be realistic. We have to solve our problems. We have to know where we stand. We have to know what our problems are and how can we solve them. So security is a must. Also the stock market, we are all witnessing, and maybe the rest of the panel will definitely touch base on that, but it's not as promising as we've seen before. Also with the ban on the 23 investors and then the cancellation of this decree, so I think it's a matter, the damage is done already. So certainly it had an impact on the stock market. A big problem in energy. The provision of power is in danger, we all know that. And hopefully, we don't want to see a black summer, but I think it's coming. Shortage of fertilizers also in the agricultural sector led to a drop in agriculture exports by 10%. So we're talking, we have problems in energy, in education, in health, but let's be hopeful, and maybe we can see some light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you.
Thank you, and let me just follow up on that. What is, I mean, we're sitting here talking about the IMF loan. When you're already attracting a lot of donor money, there are interest, there is low interest bearing, but you're still attracting money that you need to pay back. Why are we lending you money and not lending us money?
I'll tell you the secret. We're an autonomous organization. We're a quasi-governmental organization. We're neither public nor private. We're under the umbrella of the UNDP, the United Nations Development Programme. So we enjoy the systems, the methodologies, the controls, and so on and so forth, and the donors' trust. And we are chaired by the Prime Minister as the chairman of the board of the Social Fund. So you have the political endorsement and you have the trust of the international donors, because you have transparency, you have governance, and within the Social Fund we have divisions for governance and for, and so on and so forth, which is very important for donors to see. The important secret, which I'm going to disclose, is that we mobilize our own resources. We do not burden the government's budget. We're autonomous of the government budget. Every single penny that comes comes to the social fund, is not from the government. So to the government, we're a very important vehicle, we're a very important tool. However, we are the entity liable for the repayment at the end of the day. However, this also reflects a problem of the social fund. It's not just a piece of cake. Since we receive our loans and grants from donors in foreign currency, we disburse to our intermediaries who implement our loans to the end beneficiaries in Egyptian pounds, but who is liable for the repayment? It's the social fund in foreign currency. So there's a very huge foreign currency risk that we bear. We deal in all currencies, namely the Kuwaiti dinar. Look at the Kuwaiti dinar, for instance. It's a very volatile currency. It's up to 22 pounds nowadays. And of course, what we're witnessing, dollars, euros, and so on and so forth, it's a basket of currencies that we deal with. So we have to start hedging. We have to think of creative tools, or maybe to ask the government for some interference to cover our foreign exchange risk. So why are we a piece of cake to the donors? We repay the loans. Simple as that.
Thank you, which is quite interesting as a matter of fact. I'm going to move very quickly to Planet Investment Banking. We have with us Sameh Farhadin, one of the directors there. Now, Planet is a very, very interesting concept because it's one of those Egyptian companies that comes from people that have experience in the industry, but it's one of those new companies that came out in the last year, less than a year ago. And when we first heard of it, it was the full acquisition of EFG Hermes. So, it's a very bold move from such a young company, but it has the experiences behind it. So, without further ado, I want Sameh Farhadin, who focuses mostly, and we talked about small and medium enterprises, he focused mostly on small and medium enterprises. And this is quite interesting because when you started off as Planet Invest, what happened was you're looking at EFG Hermes. So can you tell us about the program on a little bit less than these big issues? Thanks.
Thank you, Ashraf. I want to start by the second that's also on this panel for the helping is for the economic development in Egypt to tap into the SME sector. It is a sector that really accounts for more than 50% of GDP contribution, employing more than 90% of the total workers in Egypt. Total workforce in Egypt. A plan for it, a kind of multiple integration analysis between the economic growth in Indonesia, India, and South Korea across a number of independent factors, including the percentage of SMEs as a percentage of the total registered enterprises, level of domestic availability of domestic credit, level of education, and we find a very significant relationship, statistically significant relationship between the number of SMEs as a percentage of enterprises and availability of finance to the growth in Egypt. Egyptian bank has been very conservative, or have been very conservative in financing the SME sector in Egypt. The total loans availed by the Egyptian bank to the SME sector is only 5%. And given the current macroeconomic picture, with the ever-increasing regulation for the bank, including Basel II and Basel III, and the fact that the Egyptian banks are financing the T-bills of the government, we are not bullish that the Egyptian bank appetite will change. At Planet, we're adapting a different model. So basically, we aspire to be a platform that provides complementary non-banking product and service to the SME sector. This means providing the whole full-fledged product, including leasing and mezzanine financing. Let's be frank, there are some problems intrinsic to the SME sector, including the lack of collateral credit history, insufficient information, or even the high cost of serving the sector itself from the bank. At Planet, we are providing this idea to the Egyptian banks, and we hope that they will invest indirectly to the sector on behalf of through a fund manager with a private equity mentality. This is what we're doing in Planet. We're adopting a skimming strategy. We're targeting small and medium-sized enterprises with an enterprise value between 50 and 250. It is very important for this sector because basically we have a kind of managerial structure and an existing operating structure. We hope to have our bank and financial institution, insurance company especially, to invest in our fund that we're currently raising. And basically, if we started this idea, I guess we will see an ever-increasing contribution for this sector to the Egyptian economy. This is from my side, Ashraf. I had a lot of lists to do, but sorry, I have a meeting in Zaynab.
Before you run, Badru, so we can leave with, let me ask you a very, very important question, because this keeps on coming up with small, medium enterprise. What is your definition as planned investment of a small, medium enterprise?
What's our
Your definition. What is this small money? Is it £50,000? Is it £50 million? I mean, Sphinx, which is Citadel Capital Platform for small, medium enterprises, they're looking at tickets about $50 million, I think.
same issue, but we are approaching the sector with different mentality or different bullet. We are doing it through two dimensions, which is basically leasing, structured asset-based financing, and mezzanine. Structured asset-based financing, basically when you do leasing, you invest in an investment decision of the SMEs. You finance fleet, existing fleet machinery, and the mezzanine will give you the flexibility to provide gross capital and even evergreen working capital facility until the SMEs stand by its own and can provide its internal or get the external financing from the bank. So it is the same ticket. It is the same ticket with a different structure.
I've got another minute. I'll ask one more question. Just to make a comment on it. This is all small, medium enterprises. I want to, maybe Ahmed or Mahmoud would have answered this a little bit more in detail, but I need to ask you a question. Because we're talking about the business environment and the risk appetite in Egypt. I believe the last thing I read about planned investment was an investment in solar energy in the lower part of Africa. I understand why you would invest in Uganda, but is this really an indication of the environment where you really feel too much risk in Egypt at this point while we need
not
solar?
not really. Actually, we are following the government initiative of investing in the Nile Valley. So basically, alternative sources were on the agenda, and it's on the direction of the current government in Egypt. We're doing it because it is lucrative, and we are having the support of the Egyptian government. A lot of support.
And then you wanted to comment on something?
Yes, on the definition for SMEs, actually there is the law number 141 for the year 2004, which defines and stipulates what is micro and what is small and number of workers. So I think you're talking about the bigger scope, larger scope that includes the medium to large. Because small is up to 1 billion Egyptian pounds and micro is up to 50,000 Egyptian pounds.
So basically, SMEs, they account for around 20% of the total registered enterprise in Egypt. And as I told you, we're adopting a scaling strategy. Basically, we want to have a success, get a milestone before penetrating the market. So, and this sector is the sector that's ready for private investment now. They have operating infrastructure and existing managerial infrastructure that need to be enhanced with a proper code of corporate governance. By the way, the Egyptian code of corporate governance is one of the best in Egypt, but rarely being followed by the corporate environment.
Sam, thank you. And again, I'm very sorry for the delay, and I don't have to leave. But please, whenever you can, I'd like to thank him and thank him on the day, of course. Before I start with, I have 3 banks with me here that I want to focus on, and since they don't have to move, I focus on that. So I'm going to start back at was managing partner and catalyst. I'm not going to ask a smart question. I'm just going to ask what is going on. Yes,
I guess one was to look at the question, one has to go to the root or maybe get to some starting. When the last time that a change of perspective in terms of ru'ya or vision happened was in 1952, before 25th of January 2011. And through that regime change, we embarked onto a notion that is more related to the thoughts of Engels or Marx or the socialist agenda, as opposed to one that is emphasizing growth through profitability and efficiency of using resources. And therefore, all the policies and the ensuing decisions were predicated on that, on those notions. I think what we're seeing here is a shift of values, at least from the economic perspective. And one of the things things that is truly encouraging to see in terms of our new constitution is essentially facing directly this aspect of a paradigm shift in the way that we might be looking at our future. In Article 14 of our Constitution, there is a clear and definitive statement which makes it clear that one's wage needs be related to productivity. That's a pretty cataclysmic new notion that I don't think most people in Egypt realize how fundamental this statement in the Constitution relates to how we as a society are going to change in culture in the same context that potentially the UK changed its culture once Thatcher was mandated to effectively begin policies and structures that are going change the way that it was in terms of the socialist and mentalities that exist. And in order to I did a very back of the envelope calculation. I'm sure economists would find all kinds of holes to plug. But in 1950, the relative per capita GDP in the UK vis-a-vis Egypt was 1.5 times. Today it's 13 times. And if I were to just make a quick back of the envelope calculation in terms of the opportunity cost of that period of time, in terms of were we to maintain our productivity for the last 60 years vis-a-vis the UK, the opportunity cost of not having done so is 19 trillion British pounds. I mean, that is just a staggering. That also, on the other side of the coin, shows what kind of opportunity exists in Egypt today with regards to having a completely different value proposition in terms of our culture and the way we perceive things vis-a-vis at least the economic side of things. Naturally, if I was one of the 7.5 million government employees and I look at the Constitution and it says that my wage is going to be related to my productivity, I would tend to want to sabotage any attempt to make that happen in any way, shape, or form. And no wonder that we're seeing effectively the public sector behave very much in the context of folks that are on strike. They basically are not doing their job with, I believe, an implicit desire to ensure that this transition doesn't happen. And I think it's important that, and obviously there are political ramifications and issues that are related, but nevertheless, if I were, any of the donors or any of the money that's supposed to be headed towards development in Egypt, one of the projects that I would find that would be very accretive in the context of what I said is putting some KPIs to the performance of public sector aid or institutions, or they say, okay, what is your productivity in terms of how many applications have you had and how many have you processed in this amount of time, and essentially hold accountable these institutions that are very much they're in the critical path of the success of any of the businesses, especially SMEs, which are supposed to be the engines of growth, and certainly I do agree 100% that the engines of growth. So, where are the efforts that are essentially targeting the relationship that is embedded in our Constitution today, that holds the tenet that there is a relationship between payment and performance. vis-a-vis specifically the government institutions that are in the critical path of making that are stopping effectively a lot of these SMEs to flourish and be able to go around.
Let me add to that. Okay, relating performance to payment, I think that maybe try to implement this with the Cairo Traffic Department or the Traffic Department in general. That's why we're getting 40,000 pound tickets per month. I mean, who's going to regulate that? We already have a problem with regulation. We have a problem with rule of law. So now our laws are divided by regulation. I think there was something to do with the book. And that's been refused as well. They said that yeah, that doesn't count. You guys are wrong. So our laws are wrong. Our regulations are wrong. I mean, what the root cause or the root problem to be solved from regulation itself? What's your opinion on that?
All right. I guess that also relates, in my mind, to something that's relatively fundamental. In terms of what the characteristic of the book or the wasf or the description of what democracy is. And, in many cases, and I think this revolution actually has elucidated in my mind what it represents and what it is. It's not about necessarily the technical aspect of things with regards to a voting box that is counted in a fair way. I think what represents what a democracy at the very core is the absence of fear, the absence of fear from the perspective of dissension or saying, or observing something that doesn't work or saying anything. There is no, there isn't a barrier to essentially face the truth or issues where values are being are discordant in terms of one perspective versus the another. And I mean, if we look at say in U.S. history, in many instances the state reacts very violently to dissension in terms of a proposition that is not consistent with existing policies like war and other historical things. Or that in the Bill of Rights, all men are created equal, and for 80 years that society participated in trading of human beings. So I mean, what's on the surface or written down isn't really the issue. The issue is, at the end of the day, the application. And as long as we are embarked on a process where this absence of fear exists, then everything else is going to eventually, by necessity, be the corrective action is going to take place. So as much as there may be at every instance issues that are or vested interests that are going to try and subvert any positive movement in the direction of being accretive to the economy, the fact that this element has now this new paradigm that exists and will exist and will be very difficult to subvert. This constant interaction of not being satisfied with what is this state of being is going to manifest itself in certainly a lot of violence. It's going to manifest itself in a lot of unrest. But in the end of the day, it's going to represent an accretive outcome in terms of all the elements that we face as a society.
Thank you. Actually, when you were talking right now, you reminded me of a fantastic book I read as a child. I didn't understand it back then, but when I grew up, I understood that Animal Farm was a very political book. And on that statement, they had the rules, and the rules said that all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. Yeah, I mean, it's called Animal Farm, so I'm not referring to anybody in that context, but I'm saying this is exactly how one feels today. It's a fantastic read, and to the end of it, I think that's exactly where we're going to reach, as part of this revolution. Let me go to Sigma. We're looking for $4.8 billion. We've been looking for them for a very, very long time. Past years, it seems like it's the most important thing in our lives, and I still don't see the importance. Like I said this morning, let's not focus on borrowing and putting debt onto our children, but let's focus on building a vibrant manufacturing sector with trade and really start doing these things now. We wake up every morning and we lose 5 billion, 7 billion, 16 billion. The stock exchange has been destroyed, basically, because of decisions that we don't see because we're asleep while they're taken, and they're cancelled before we wake up. But we wake up and we see the aftermath, the disaster that we've been seeing on the stock exchange. What is your take on that? And vis-a-vis the loan from the IMF. I understand it's going to give us a good image in front of everybody. Listen, Glenn, but is it the same thing if I perform really well as an economy without the borrowing, that I can still get more and attract more investment? But what's your take on that?
Well, first of all, when it comes to the stock market, I don't think the problem is how much we've lost or gained every day. I mean, 4 billion, 3 billion, and so on and so forth is not the issue. Okay, it's just data. The problem is that after we used to trade 2 billion pounds a day, now we're trading 200 million. Okay, so it shows that people are no longer interested. And this is the real problem. Okay. The stock market hasn't lost that much. It has lost 20% since January 23. It's not that much in view of what has happened to the economy, what we're feeling. I mean, I don't have any other commitments today. I know that a lot of other investment bankers don't have other commitments today, or tomorrow, or next week. And it tells you something else. Okay. With regard to the 4.8 billion, I think that it's very important for us to realize that Egypt's debt, in terms of foreign debt, is around 15 or 16% of GDP, which is not much. And over the past 15 years, banks have been lending the government tremendous amounts of money, and it has been crowding out the private sector. And 5 or 6 years ago, bank loans to private sector and public sector were at twice as much as investments in T-bills and sovereign debt as today. They represented 60% of deposits. Loans represented 60% of deposits. Now it's the other way around. Okay? So I think this is the real problem. We need to borrow from abroad because borrowing from abroad will establish, first of all, a stamp of credibility to the economy, and it will decrease interest rates for private sector. I don't think the private sector can borrow at 16 and 17%. Because the government is borrowing at 14 and 15%.
So you truly, again, because I have this issue with that IMF loan. I mean, I understand the argument of borrow the money from the IMF, it's a seal of approval that you guys are doing well. Okay. But the real performance of the economy, we know, is it really that 4.8? I mean, how much we were making on tourism. I mean, if we would have maintained tourism and maybe the increase. Before the revolution, we had a government that was performing at 7% GDP growth. We were still being very greedy and aspiring for double-digit growth. And it's not out of greediness, because economically it made sense for us to grow at 11% because of the inflation, because of the unemployment and all of this. But in our level, what would we be satisfied at a level of GDP growth that we can say now we are moving in the right direction? You know, it's sort of like having bad GPA in university. Okay, but they will take it on the fact that if you improve, we're going to count the improvement rather than we're going to count what the real GPA value is. So is it the case here? If we really, let's say we don't get this loan. I'm being very optimistic in a sense. Let's say we don't get this loan. What are we going to do? I heard the government come up and say, even if we don't get the loan, we're going to put together this fantastic plan. You're just going to go, if you had a fantastic plan, you would have got the loan. What other alternatives do we have other than the loan that can be implemented, let's not say immediate short term, but at least short to mid term?
I think that the loan it's not a standalone thing. Okay, we need to get that loan because we're basically we're bankrupt. we do not want to admit it, but we are. Okay, and no, we need to spend on infrastructure, and we need to spend a lot on infrastructure. As Dr. Alak mentioned, we're going to have a black summer coming up in 2 months. Okay, and over when we have in the previous panel, someone mentioned that we actually have about $3.5 billion left in terms of discretionary funds that can be used to protect the currency and so on and so forth. Okay, this represents less than a month of imports. Okay. So we do need to get that loan. We need to get more loans from abroad, not just that one. Okay.
This will certainly be absorbed to support the budget. It's a budget support loan. But further to your question, what we need to boost and to move forward is pure security. It's pure security to allow and attract investors to come to this country, FDIs. It's pure security to allow for tourism to reboost again. But it's not a matter of a loan that will be given to the government to just to support and to cover the budget deficit. It's a vicious circle. I mean, it's ongoing. It will be ongoing for a month, for a year, for God knows when. But the most important is the political stability and the security of this country, which would allow for FDIs and for tourism to improve.
I'd like to add something that in the previous panel, again, someone mentioned that Egypt is too big to fail. Okay. What about Turkey, Poland, Brazil, Russia, and so on? They didn't fail. However, we've seen inflation of 600% and 2,000%, and devaluations that meant, if applied here, the dollar at 30 or 40 pounds. Okay. Does this mean that the country has failed? It hasn't. But we will see a lot of hardship. Okay.
Obviously, I mean, I think the comment that was made earlier that there is the political dimension is purely the basis, and so, you know, barring that, let's say that we go through and eventually have a complete mechanical set of governance, meaning that we have elections for the parliament. That, in my mind, would be, once that step is taken, if it's taken, would constitute the basis for which any outside observer would say, okay, Egypt now has gone through the transition, had the revolution, had six elections, and so now we have reached solid ground, and from there the process will continue, whether through other amendments to the Constitution and the political process. But without that element being there, I think that we still will be a challenge to be able to start building again. But having said that, you know, if I were to say somebody who wants to do, you know, somebody asked me, give me one immediate policy change that you would make today that might, you know, alleviate, hit several birds with one stone. And I would come and say, okay, starting tomorrow, Egypt is open skies. There is no any airline or anyone that wants to use any of the airports in Egypt can set up a route, whether internal or external, scheduled flight, anything you want. It's open skies. Obviously, that would put Egypt there in a hugely compromising position from a competitive point of view. But in my mind, I don't care. I want to essentially immediately affect the usage of an infrastructure infrastructure that exists, whether it be in the form of airports or hotels and so on that exist. And clearly, that would immediately kickstart a dynamic that might otherwise not have been, that would bring in foreign exchange and so on. And this, in my mind, not doing this, and the monopoly of Egypt Air, all the airports in terms of the ground services, as well as the prevention of having scheduled flights from any airport, whether it be from abroad or inside the country, is probably one of the single largest impediments to investments in Egypt. That would be my first one.
It's very ironic that you use the airport analogy here, because you're going to learn to not find electricity because they're apparently closing it down for 4 hours, which is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my whole entire life. And that brings me to Mr. Fehmi, in structured finance and mostly concentrates in PPP at HSBC. Now, I think the airport, the Cairo airport, is a PPP in that sense. Yeah, there's private sector companies that are working on it. Why are we closing down our airport for 4 hours? When? Well, we could have, borrowed money from you as the Social Fund of Development, lent it to small medium enterprises that would work on solar, even the assembly of solar panels, like my high school in Bayonne, New Jersey, filled their whole roof with solar panels. Couldn't we have done that? Seriously, nobody thought to that extent where now we're shutting down electricity at the Cairo International Airport. This is just one of the examples that we have. But I want to talk more about the PPP environment right now. We have a PPP panel. Next, there's going to go into more details, and their government representatives that will tell us a lot of these fantastic new opportunities coming to PPP. How successful has it been pre-revolution? What have you seen in the past 2 years post-revolution? What are your expectations for PPP to actually help in the forming of our economic recovery?
Thanks, Ashraf. I mean, if you allow me, just one quick comment on the IMF loan. One of the importance of this IMF loan is that it will unlock other sources of finance that are waiting for this loan to happen. On the infrastructure side, I mean, going forward, I think there's a massive demand for essential public infrastructure, which is nothing new here. We're talking about power, water, ports, railways, you name it, and also social infrastructure like hospitals and schools. So I can safely say that I think Egypt's economic growth will be largely dependent on those infrastructure spend. I think given the sheer amount of capital that those projects will require, and given the budget constraint, there is no other route other than to tap into private sources, so private investors, local banks, international banks, development banks that will support those projects. I mean, looking at the past, I mean, Egypt was one of the most active infrastructure market in the Middle East, I would say, and in the project finance market in specific. So we've had lots of landmark projects in the past. Mainly those projects were mainly in the oil and gas sector, but now we have more to spend on the infrastructure side. So from a platform perspective, I think the banks are ready. On the legal side, these are very legal projects, so they would require lots of legalities is also in place. You have the expertise in the local banks, the lawyers, etc. So I think, I mean, from a need perspective and the platform, everything is ready for those projects to kickstart. I mean, it's just a matter of will of getting those projects into place.
Let me ask you a question. There's a lot of talk from the current government, and I was talking about this as part of this presidential campaign. It was part of everybody's presidential campaign. And this whole concept of the Suez Canal, industrial zones, the Suez Canal, Suez, Sheikh Said, Sheikh Tafriya, all of these things that we've been hearing since 2005, 2006. I've seen the plans before. It was a Dutch company that did it. We had the money, we had the cash reserves. Why didn't we do it? How does this fit this whole Suez Canal? How can I say craze? Craze. I understand it has to be done. We believe in that. What is the role of PPP in this specific project? And if you could also add, I'm hearing one of the things, fantastic things about the Western Desert. All of a sudden, there were like 3 ministers that went to visit it. Took a picture next to a landmine. And, one of the things we've been hearing for a very, very long time. That's where they want to put nuclear power plants. Is that something you would invest in as a PPP? My first question, what's happening in the Suez Canal? How do you foresee this? And then the Eastern Desert with the energy infrastructure that, I hope they don't build nuclear power plants in Egypt. I really hope so. It's going to look like a Homer Simpson.
I mean, on the Suez Canal side, definitely PPP would play a role there because that's a public-private investment at the end of the day, and I think that the potential is huge. PPP has been used globally in financing ports, so this is definitely one way of doing it. And probably maybe the only way of doing it is given that we need private sector investment and international banks to finance those. I mean, one of the important aspects here that we need to really highlight is the fact that Egypt is not only competing with itself, right? We are competing with very large infrastructure projects in the region and globally, and accordingly, in order to attract those investors and international banks, you would need to have the right environment for this to happen. On the Western Desert side, I think part of the investments that Egypt will need to do definitely going forward is investments in the oil and gas sector, because we are facing a gas shortage. We are facing, a reduction in investments in the gas sector, which we need badly in order to feed the power plants, and as well on the renewable side. So there's a huge potential. I mean, from a potential perspective, if everything is there, it's just getting everything in place in order to kickstart all this process.
But just to, in 30 seconds, I just want to know, are you facing any hindering, let's say there are any regulations or policies that hinder the easiness of doing business under the PPP? As a very small example, I saw something that was coming out of, it had to do with the Port Said oil or something to that extent, and the partnership, it's a 25-year, I don't know what you, as a private sector, you only own 25% of the project. The structure itself, the structure of PPP deals, do you feel that there needs to be a change in policy, regulation, and laws to facilitate this type of business? And the last question, what is the incentive for any private enterprise today to go into partnership with our government?
Okay, so I think the most important thing that those PPP projects are of a long-term nature. So we're talking about long-term investments, a long-term view on the country. So accordingly, in order for private investors, international and local, to go ahead with those projects, again, we need to have a stable business environment. From a legal perspective and from a structural perspective, as I said, this is not the first time Egypt has undergone a PPP transaction. Believe it or not, but the first international standard PPP project happened in Egypt in 1998 in the power sector, and that's the very well-known Sidi Krir power plant. And accordingly, all along this year, since 1998, we've had several power projects, we've had oil and gas deals, all were structured in a sort of a PPP structure. And more recently, after the revolution, we had a very big PPP transaction, which is Egyptian Refining Company, sponsored by Citadel Capital and QP. And that's a $3.5 billion transaction that was closed and financed by the banks post-revolution. So it's a very strong vote of confidence. So again, from a structure and legal perspective, everything is in place, I would say.
Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to Sharif, and then finally I'm going to come to you, Dalia Hennan, because we're going to talk about the non-traditional part of the banking sector. I want to get their comments first, and then give you the floor. Sharif, when we were talking about banking, a very interesting thing, 2008, 2009, 2010, we were having a completely different conversation about banking. Our major problems were really, interest rates between the government banks or public banks versus the private banks, or small arguments here and there, small medium enterprises, whether they're bankable or equitable or not, do we lend them microfinance, the new law. And we were talking about electronic payments and all of these fantastic, interesting things. How's the banking sector doing right now? That's one. I'm glad to have the two British banks, HSBC and Barclays, still with us. The French didn't fare too well in Egypt. But in your opinion, you're a very unique, high-end bank in a sense. What's been the impact of the past 2 years on your bank specifically? And how has the mentality changed from talking about those small things as, interest rates of car loans, and I know all the products are still there, but I think it's a little bit more complicated now. You're not seeing, people really borrowing, you're not lending, people aren't putting savings, people are really afraid. I mean, how has that changed in the past 2 years?
Well, first I would like to thank you for inviting me today. The past 2 years have been very challenging, as you mentioned. Before we were talking about spreads, percentages, and customer experience, mainly internal things. The macroeconomy was very stable, the curve was growing, and we, as the other 38 banks in the market, were just riding the wave. So it was a pretty easy environment, challenging but a bit challenging. Over the past 2 years, the discussions, I think, and all banks will agree with me that it has been like a macro level environment now. To answer your question on the banking sector, how is it doing? I think it's doing great. I don't think that there are, it's one of the sectors that Mr. Oscar touched base on. It's one of the very strong sectors still existing in Egypt today. And that's not because of 1 or 2 years of work. I think that has been a full decade of building corporate governance and banking regulations by the central bank. So banks are very liquid. We have one of the best loan-to-deposit ratios in the Middle East, just below 50%, 47 to 49%. So a lot of people see that as an opportunity. However, we have to make a very conscious decision here, because we don't want to be following profitability, just running behind high treasury bills and taking the depositors' money and just placing it. We've seen an analysis done by Al Mal newspaper a couple of months ago on all of the Q3 reported banks. And what we realized is we've seen around 90% of the banks in the market having a flat balance sheet when it came to corporate lending, while you can see that the majority of the investments went into the sovereignties, treasury bills and treasury bonds. I'm not saying that that's something that should not happen, but we have to make, as a state, conscious decision. How much will I put, how much of the balance, the mix of my balance sheet will be in treasury bills and how much will be in corporate lending. We'll have to not forget the main role of a bank, which is simply taking savings and investing it back into the economy. Treasury bills and the corporate. So if I just follow treasury bills and profitability, I would definitely help the economy. If I look at the balance sheet that we had last year, we grew the balance sheet 20% on the corporate side of Barclays, compared to almost a stagnant level on the treasury bills. This doesn't mean that we're not investing in treasury bills. We still have around 50% of our portfolio in treasury bills. But it was a conscious decision we made in Q1 of last year that I want to still support the investments. I want to still support the turnover of our corporates. That's one. The second one, building on all of the assets we have, which is the innovation piece. And I think innovation, financial innovation, will bring saving levels higher, which we all know that around 10% of the population only bank with banks. And that means that we are still lagging behind a big market share. And I'm not comparing it to 90 million, still 10%, 7 million people having bank accounts. That's really small. So what we need to do, we need to start looking at innovation. And we've seen an example, which is M-Pesa, which is the money transfer in Kenya, where Safaricom introduced that person-to-person transfer in Kenya. And in a matter of a few years, unbelievable turnover of money being transferred over this phone. If you look at the average transaction for M-Pesa, it's $33, which is around 250 Egyptian pounds. That's it. That's the average transaction. However, they have an annual turnover of more than $5 billion. So imagine that's a new stream of funding that's currently outside of the system, outside of the economy. The minute you will create the environment for that level of innovation, you will start new streams of funding getting into the market, whether it's foreign currency or local currency. The last piece, I think, one of the building on the assets that the banking sector has is paying back to the community. And we started that program in Barclays. We call it the citizenship. It's not community, it's all about citizenship. My role in the economy is not just a matter of Ramadan campaign, feeding food people and That's it. We want to enhance more of the skills of the people in the community through either teaching them new life skills or entrepreneurship skills. And the most important piece that we're working on is financial literacy. We want to teach people how to save, what banking means, what lending means, what a جمعية means, what's the difference between a bank and a جمعية, and how interest rates and linked to inflation, and the difference between conventional banking and Islamic banking. So, just to wrap up, I think we as a banking sector, on Barclays specifically, we're in a very good position for the economy, the different three angles that I mentioned. But just to comment, before I wrap up, just to comment on the IMF loan. I think everybody's, as you mentioned, we wake up in the morning and everybody's talking about IMF loan, how much is it, 4.8, should we get 750 million at short term or not? But I think the bigger question that nobody's asking, or that even see any solution for, which is what are we going to do with the IMF loan? So we get the 4.8, and then it will open the door for more donors. Then what we're going to do with the money from the more donors? Same 10 million, 12 billion, 15 billion. I don't see any plan, or nobody even is discussing it. Everybody's discussing whether it's halal or haram. Everybody's discussing, okay, will we get 4.8, 3.2, or 15 billion? But what are we doing with it? The last piece I want to touch base on, which is related to the IMF loan, is simply we are very much concerned about the long-term investment view. However, there's tactical issues that we need to tackle immediately to continue with the work, to enable us to build on the strategic piece. Simply is one of the budget deficits, the XY liquidity, security, and the most important piece is material decisions. Lately, we've seen a lot of amateur decisions. I don't know whether it was a rumor, whether it was a real decision, but you wake up every day and you have tons of information and you don't even know which one is right or wrong. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to touch on Professor if you can tell me this, because I have a comment that I really just need to say. Signing this IMF agreement is chicken for the credit rating today. How will the IMF agreement impact our credit rating as a country? Or has our credit rating already impacted the possibility of us getting the loan? And if we get the loan, what is your opinion on the impact on credit rating?
Let's differentiate between the physical credit rating. Let's first understand the credit ratings. Credit ratings is not only tied by the budget deficit. There are 200 different factors that affect the credit rating. And one of the biggest factors influencing the credit rating is the weight of the people driving the economy. It's that simple. Okay. Even in good days, you saw the United States back in 2011, I think, it was downgraded. This doesn't mean that the United States economy is weak. It was just a matter of they were just looking at a certain level of expertise. Everybody can drive a good boat in a good day, but not everyone can just sail a boat in a bad day. So what they were looking for actually is more about people quality. You've got the right people in the right place, the budget deficit will close, XY liquidity, security, and material decisions will come up. So it's not a matter of IMF loan. I don't see that the IMF loan is linked at all with the credit rating of the country. I think it's more linked to the quality of people in this driving the steering wheel.
I actually enjoyed that comment. So our credit rating is based on the quality and performance of the people in power, in a sense.
But it's in the books.
Yes, just handle our economic affairs, not in power, but handle our economic affairs.
I'm sorry, I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying what's in the book. And I think any economist can just...
That's on the contrary, we call it constructive criticism. But if the reality is that our credit rating is impacted by the performance of certain individuals that are, in power or at least leading our economic achievements, this is quite incredible. I think they should know that. They should know that they're impacting our credit rating negatively. But
we don't really need to invent science. Science is there. Just open the book and read it. It's that simple.
48% of the population doesn't agree with that. Yeah, maybe we need to teach them that. But thank you very much. That was actually very enlightening. I want to move from traditional banking and what we've been talking about. And Dr. Dali Abdelkader is a mentor to a lot of us, especially in the non-traditional aspect of banking. And we've had side conversations specifically about sustainable finance, and we need to
تم
understand.
إعادة هيكلته، تم نجاحه، وصمد أزمة مالية عالمية 2008، صمد ثورة، وما زال بيحقق ربح. يعني البالانس شيتس والبروفيت اند لوس ستيتمنتس اوف ذا بانكس ار ستيل بوزيتيف. فأنا النهارده بيقول ممكن يكون مهاتير مصر، مش شرط مهاتير يكون زعيم. ممكن مهاتير يكون قطاع مصرفي relatively ثبت وجوده، صمد relatively محترم في وقت كان فيه كلام عن يعني انحرافات كتيرة، نجح. طيب النهارده القطاع المصرفي ازاي ممكن يقود قاطرة النمو الاقتصادي في مصر؟ وانا هنا مش عايزه اكون ثيوريتيكال او بتكلم كلام نظري. هو صمد، بس هو كمان ضحيه حاجتين. ضحيه المايكرو ايكونوميك تشالنجز او وضع اقتصادي متدني، مش هنتكلم على الفورن depreciation of the currency، على ال deterioration of reserves، مش هنتكلم على fiscal challenges، كل اللي احنا اتكلمنا فيه وعارفينه كويس قوي. وكمان ضحيه السوفرن ريتنج او تدني تقييم مصر. وافتكر من 10 ايام حصل كل اسبوعين نلاقي انه بيحصل انخفاض للتقييم الائتماني لمصر. وافتكر احنا دلوقتي سي ولا دبل سي، لان داخلين على الديفولت، صح؟ داخلين على الديفولت. فالنهارده على قد ما هو عنده بوتنشال قطاع مصرفي، هو عنده سقف، هو مش هيقدر يعمل، هو ضحيه ان البلد عندها مشكله. طيب ايه المخرج؟ وانا لسه مستخسره القطاع المصرفي. مش بس بقول ان هو ليه مسؤوليه لقياده مصر او to trigger economic growth، لا، هو عشان هو كمان ينمو محتاج ان في الوقت ده يحصل تغيير منهجي structural change in its approach conceptually and in practice. يعني عشان الخص الفتره اللي سابقه دي، انا بقول ان politics hijacks economics hijacks finance, but still finance can trigger economic growth اللي ممكن تكون طموحه او يعني بقى استفزازيه، اقول ممكن يعمل انفراجه سياسيه. طب ازاي؟ اللي بقوله ان احنا علشان يحصل تحول للقطاع المصرفي دوره ونظرته او مفهومه لايه اللي ممكن يكون فيه، بيتحول من تمويل تقليدي traditional finance للسستينبل فاينانس اللي هو التمويل المستدام. اشرف سألني اتكلم عن تعريف التمويل المستدام. التمويل المستدام او السستينبل فاينانس هو مفهوم بيراهن على حتميه العلاقه بين البعد الاقتصادي او تحقيق الارباح والابعاد الثلاثه الاتيه: المجتمع، البيئه، والحوكمه. pure assumption ان مش ممكن يحصل نمو اقتصادي او استمرار ارباح الا لو كان في توازن مع العنصر المجتمعي والعنصر البيئي وعنصر الحوكمه. خلاص؟ الكونسيبت ده على فكره مش جديد، الكونسيبت ده ظهر في اواخر التسعينات واقر في مؤتمر World Conference on Sustainable Development في جوهانسبرج 2002. كل الفاينانشال انستتيوشنز، اليونايتد نيشنز، الحكومات اقروا ان في حاجه اسمها سستينبل فاينانس وان مهم جدا. وافتكر في حد في البانل قال لك التنميه والنمو، ان انا عندي فلوس كتير مش معناها ان انا بنمو. ف رغم ان احنا اقرينا من سستينبل فاينانس والفاينانشال انستتيوشنز اقروه، الا ان هم ما مارسوهوش خالص. واي شود they؟ هم كانوا بيعملوا ربحيه عاليه جدا، ربحيه that intimidated auditors, intimidated regulators. Nobody would get close to them. Those investment bankers were really doing it. I mean, يعني البروفيتس كانت humongous. لغايه امتى؟ 2008 كانت اول testimony in sustainable finance is not preaching, it's not a theory, it's practice. ليه؟ لان البنوك دي سقطت وتهاوت في عز قدرتها على تحقيق الارباح. structured products والديريفاتيفز، لكن الحوكمه وقعت منهم فوقعوا. لو اتكلمنا بالتحديد عن مصر هنلاقي ان الفاينانشال سيكتور والايكونوميك سيكتور او الفاينانشال جروث والايكونوميك جروث were a perfect duet قبل الثوره. الاثنين كانوا ماشيين هايل، financial reform, economic growth ومصر حققت اكبر معدل كانت يعني وورلد بانك وصفها ان هي من احسن معدلات النمو في الاسواق الناشئه 7.5 some say it's 8%. it was superior قبل 2011. بس اللي حصل ان العلاقه اللي بين الاقتصاد والمال اللي هي كانت بيرفكت تجاهلت حاجه مهمه جدا، البعد المجتمعي. خلاص؟ كل الفلوس دي كانت محصوره at the top of the pyramid. Big corporate clients, big investments, big money. They were happy. But what happened is that the bottom of the pyramid collapsed. And they were, those at the top were the first to suffer. خلاص وجعنا دلوقتي الوضع في سيلينج، البنوك في مأزق. زي ما شريف قال وأتيكا بالظبط قال ان الكوربريت بورتفوليو بتاعي تجمد. يعني اوكي احنا لسه كويسين لان كان في governance كويسه وكان في ريسك اسسمنت كويسه، فالبروفيجنز we are still in good shape but we will not grow anymore. And mind you here I'm not talking about the welfare of Egypt. انا مش بتكلم بالضبط عن القطاع المصرفي ينقذ مصر، هو ده هيحصل بس هو هينقذ نفسه الاول لان هو دلوقتي عليه ليميت. What I'm saying in sustainable finance اللي بيقول القطاع المالي بص على المجتمع. This makes a perfect business sense. Ashraf, stop me if I go too far.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I'm talking about the business case, the financial sector. I'm not talking preaching, I'm not talking patriotism. I'm talking in wealth is at the bottom of the pyramid. We all talked about the potentials in Egypt. We know Egypt has lots of potential. We have a huge, humongous market. Wealth is at the bottom of the pyramid. And unless every bank takes the mandate as it is lending the top, another hand should be injecting money at the bottom. Microfinance. There is lots of money, lots of profitability. في حاجة اسمها financial depth اللي هو the ratio of loans to the GDP. This is very limited. And as you said, I think Sharif said the 10% banking population. Can you see how much we're foregoing just because we're focusing on the top? Unless the banking sector underbanked, unless the banking sector assumes sustainable finance تمويل المستدام اللي بيبص على المجتمع واللي بيقول انا في اللحظه دي في مصر وانا عندي 30 مليون unemployed وعندي بطاله وعندي بلطجه وعندي هو الامن ده ايه؟ الامن ده مش ناس مش لاقيه تاكل. And we're waiting for politics to solve. اخطر حاجه على القطاع المصرفي مش التحديات الاقتصاديه، اخطر حاجه على القطاع المصرفي انه يعني يسجد نفسه في الفكر التقليدي ويبقى منتظر السلام السياسي او الانفراجه السياسيه والتحسن الاقتصادي واستنى IMF او وديعه قطريه او وديعه قطريه او وديعه ليبيه. The way can see politics ما تلاقش بالقطاع المصرفي. جايز انا بايظ شويه عشان انا منه بس انا حضرته من الثمانينات وشفت المكان اللي عنده مأزق وعنده باد داتس وي 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 وشفت ان هو اتحسن. فانا النهارده بتحسس مين في مصر ممكن يعمل فرق؟ not الفاينانشال سيكتور alone بس what I'm calling or urging ان dramatic shift in financial sector thinking. And mind you, this is not only in Egypt. انتوا لو تشوفوا قطاع financial industry worldwide هي في مأزق بس هم مش قادرين يعترفوا. هو شغالين على البيل اوت اوف governance بس في pressures at the grassroots level حاجه زي Occupy Wall Street. What are they saying? They are condemning the greed of the financial industry. ان هم they are not minded by this issue. فانا بتكلم في مصر لو انا عايزه انقذ او مش انقذ to leverage the strength of the banking sector with calibers اللي هم relatively very well exposed and quite professional. لا هقول لهم revisit the microfinance, lots of money, diversified risk او تنويع مخاطر. انا بدل النهارده مع الكوربريت بورتفوليو بتاعي نصهم في ترعه والباقي مش عارف يشتغل والباقي سياحه مضروبه، طب انا هفضل. لكن the bottom of the pyramid يعني انا اذكر جرامين بانك بيقول لك زيرو ديفولت versus 13% ديفولت في الكوميرشال لونز العادي. اكيد احنا ممكن نتكلم على المايكرو فاينانس اكتر مني. انا بتكلم على المايكرو فاينانس، بتكلم على الفيري سمول انتربرايزز، بتكلم على اس ام ايز. يعني مثلا for one figure SMEs بتشكل 80% من الاقتصاد. البانكينج لونز اللي بتروح للSMEs is 10% of bank portfolio. Can you see the mismatch? It does not make sense. 90% is going to the top of the pyramid and هو very dry right now. What we're saying إني unless I move to sustainable finance, وعلى فكرة أنا بس ركزت أو لمست على social dimension. There is the environmental dimension. زي ما بنقول it will be a dark summer. طب فين alternative energy? And where are banks? Where are they from the idea of funding or establishing PPP projects for solar energy? ازاي انا في مصر عارفه ان انا مش بس الانرجي هتغلى، and I will not find energy. يعني even if I can afford it, المصانع هتقف. There is no energy. Where is the financial sector sensing? And I have to move, have a long-term project finance for solar energy or wind energy. The only thing that's sure to يعني إن شاء الله ما نخسرهاش كمان الشمس. يعني الحاجة الوحيدة اللي لسه كويسة. unless we leverage the environmental يحصل نوع من التساوي بين القطاع المصرفي اللي هو فيه positive energy وفيه success والمجتمع ان انا اخلق حرف دي. وهرجع اقول لان انا لما بتكلم كده بقول no, it doesn't work. Microfinance, and I have the depositors' money. I'm not going to risk the depositors' money. Microfinance doesn't work in Egypt. Lots of enterprises fail. But I would say it means that there is a defect in the implementation. Not because it's a bad concept. Because South Africa, for Southeast Asia, for Brazil, there are hundreds of success stories of people who are making humongous money. And turnover of the settlement of the small loans makes huge amount of money as interest accumulation. But we're talking about sustainable finance. Ashraf, I know I made it long. Sustainable finance is humanizing finance. Because if I only focus on profit and I can't see the non-material dimension of value, I'm going under. So what I'm saying إن هي خسارة للقطاع المصرفي إنه ما يحولش للتمويل المستدام وخسارة لمصر. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There was a great American economist, I think he was referring to Chile at the time, and said that not even the most oppressive regimes can withstand the change of globalization and free market economies. And this is the one thing I'm depending on here in Egypt at this point. Henem, as she stayed with us, she missed a meeting, so I'm going to get her to be closing of the session by very quickly. If maybe in 2 minutes you can just answer it with little points.
Thank you very much, Ashraf. It was so interesting, so exciting that I opted to stay, despite that I have a very important workshop as well. Dalia, thank you very much for your insights. This is really interesting. But let me assure you and give you some good news that microfinance is extremely successful in Egypt. A lot of MFIs are in place, a lot of NGOs are doing excellent business. They have been evaluated by lots of international agencies. There are scoring systems that evaluate such NGOs and the percentage of default. And of course, it is
why banks are not there?
This is the point. This is the point. For banks, microfinance is expensive business, and this was my next talk comment to you. Why is Arab African International Bank? And in my previous life, I was a member of the Arab African International Bank. Really, we are educating, we are changing the culture in the Egyptian banks. I was just telling Ashraf, you talked about economic growth that we have witnessed in the past of 7 to 8%. But the trickle-down effect did not reach the poor. And this is a good cause for the revolution to take place. العدالة الاجتماعية, the social justice. So please focus on small and micro. ابتدوا بالsmall. مش هقول لك micro. Micro has a lot of admin costs. You can even establish an MFI بعد ما MFI law يبقى launched. But and of course this is addressed to all banks. And by the way, we have succeeded to train banks. Okay, and to spread awareness in large banks, namely the National Bank of Egypt, to start working in SMEs. And the portfolio is huge, and it's running very smoothly. So please include this in your strategy for the coming period. Okay, I have a few questions from the floor. I'll just give quick telegraphic replies. Question says, SFD manages a good amount of grants. I never thought of using part of them in a guarantee facility to mobilize SME lending to SMEs instead of direct lending. Would that concept change one day? The good news is that we are seeking some technical assistance from international banks. Namely in India, we had signed a protocol during the President's recent visit to India and Pakistan. It's the Small Industries Development Bank of India. They have an excellent guarantee scheme for SMEs, and they're going to transfer their technology to us, and we're going to get this know-how. And however, I heard, and part of it, we're exploring the idea that the central bank, together with other stakeholder banks, will establish a guarantee company for SMEs. So I think this would be a very good incentive for the banks to mitigate such risks. Okay, the next question says, how long does it take for SMEs to be granted a loan? We have some control measures. The case will be addressed to the credit committee of the social fund. We have a credit committee, a higher credit committee, and we have rating for be it NGOs or banks that we deal with, or for direct lending beneficiaries. So it takes around 2 to 3 weeks. Provided, of course, that the documentation is complete and in hand. The other question says, Islamic microfinance, yes. We have a new loan, as I said, from the Islamic Bank for Development, a $50 million loan that will be ratified, inshallah, hopefully, in a week or 10 days. And we are seeking some microfinance consultants to start working on Islamic microfinance. This is in place. SFD received $40 million from the African Development Bank to finance a small-scale franchise concept under the FSSP. Probably this is someone that knows the project very well. They know even the abbreviation. Who is eligible to receive this fund? Anybody. I think, I adopted this project. I certainly and strongly believe that franchise is a very promising sector, and this loan is for the development of the franchise sector in Egypt. If you want to be a franchisee of a local or an international franchisor, you come to the social fund, we give you a loan, and this has been coupled by a grant also for some training and technical assistance. Franchise is guaranteed success from day one. So anybody is eligible. I mean, you just tell us that we study the case together, how to develop franchise in Egypt by matchmaking franchisors and franchisees, providing for the loans to become a franchisee, and how to find a partner. We have 200 franchise concepts ready. We can share with you. Business in the UK. Okay. It's anywhere. I mean, it could be in Egypt. It could be a mobile shop, a Radio Shack, or whatever. But of course, international franchisors are a bit expensive. They're a bit on the high side. Partnering with British companies to develop mentoring. Yes, we're going to have a very interesting session with the BIBA on Thursday on that. It's mainly focused on mentoring, CSR, and franchising. Thank you very much.
I want to thank everyone on the panel. Thank you very, very much. It was extremely interesting panel. There's so much we need to discuss. We're never going to run out of things to discuss, so that's why we're going to hold another conference and another one until we have good things to discuss. هنطلع فاصل إعلاني ونرجع بعد شوية. فاصل ونعود. We'll have a 15-minute coffee break and we'll be back for the next panel. Thank you very much.